Hello everyone, welcome to a different Smite video. Now this was suggested by a viewer. I'm sorry, I cannot remember your username for the life of me because it was 2 weeks ago, and I do apologize, but this was a suggestion by a viewer that I take a pro game and talk about the strategies, the builds, and etc. That's actually why I'm a day late on my typical upload starts, because I've been experimenting around with this format, trying to see if I can add value, copyright things such as all that other stuff. I have the video silenced, partially for copyright and partially so that way you don't have me talking over the commentators, which would be highly distracting. But the commentators talk a lot more. I noticed. I sampled a bunch of pro games, of course, to add, and paid much more attention to the commentators' statements, because usually when I watch a pro game, I'm half paying attention to the commentators and half watching the action. This time I fully focused on the commentary. That was a sentence. And they talk, while they do talk strategy and builds, it is a bit more specific to the pros, specific pro playstyles, things like that. I don't know the pros as well as they do. The casters obviously have a much closer relationship with the pros than I do, so they know the pros a little bit better. They play with the pros casually. I do not play with the pros casually. I only see their pro gameplay, which is not 100% of their gameplay. They have hundreds of scrims each week that the casters are, at least some of the time, aware of. So they know the players a little bit more. So if you're looking for more specific player insights and some of the background information to the actual matches, please watch the full video. I actually recommend watching the full match on the Smite Pro YouTube channel. This is a charity game from a month ago, which is why I wanted to start with this. It's not a pro game, and the casters really represent, honestly, kind of where I'm at in my personal viewpoint of myself in my video making. Like the casters, I have a long history with the game and a lot of knowledge about the game, but I'm not really at the skill level of a pro. I don't have the reflexes of a pro, and I didn't get to my skill level by being naturally good at the game and practicing really hard. I practiced just consistently and studied the game a lot. And while the pros do study the game, of course, obviously, they're also putting in hundreds of hours with scrims, and it's harder for the casual player to relate to that, so that's actually why I started this up, started doing Smite guides and stuff, because I know for a fact that a lot of Smite players look at what the pros do and try to copy that, and that's more specific to the pros. And again, this is why it's really important to listen to the regular version with the commentators, because they can really help you understand why a pro is able to pull this off when maybe you or I couldn't, right? But I did want to take this as an example. Now, this first video is only going to be on the pick bans. I want to talk about those. And the very initial start here, like maybe the first minute or so. And then I'll do the rest of the match proper in another video. So let's just get right into that. So, just kind of ahead of time, I have watched this ahead of time. The casters here are going to pick the top 2 supports. Now, the casters are mostly going to go for more comfortable picks. They're not going to go quite as hard into the meta. Their picks are overall considered good, but not highest level. Their bans are going to be very meta, but the bans for the pros are going to be a bit more personal. Like, for example, the AMC, that's going to be a ban targeted towards one of the casters, because while AMC, I'm actually going to pause it here for a second, while AMC is good, he has great poke, he's got great damage output, he's got actually pretty good sustain for an ADC, he's got no escape, and he's got no real response if somebody jumps on him. He's got a slow and a cripple, which often isn't enough to save him should a decent jungler just get on his case. Now, the Izanami is a bit more of a meta ban. She's very powerful right now. Just her ability to clear the wave so quickly and her absolutely dominating early game presence is quite huge. So that is definitely more of a meta ban, but the AMC, I feel, based on how he's been picked and banned and played, is a bit more of a target ban. Remember, this was also a month ago. So, whereas the Emoja and the Atlas, they have a huge presence. They're really high up in the meta right now because of their presence, and that's why they were banned by the casters, is because they were afraid the pros were going to pick them up. Bastet, again, top-level jungler, one of the best junglers right now, banned immediately. Now, the pros ban Odin. There is a specific reason for this that I'm going to get into later. This is less of a target ban and more of a ban in relation to their specific strategy. The Loki, strong jungler, not highest meta, not a typical pick, definitely more of a comfort pick. Again, he kind of walks that line between a comfort pick and an actually good pick right now. He's got some issues, yes, but this is definitely a bit more on the comfort pick side. And we've got the Athena, again, a pretty strong pick. She's actually not picked as a comfort pick, despite not being top tier right now. I'll get into why in a second. You'll really start to see this. Now we pick up Janus. Now Janus is really strong right now. He's extremely hard to lock down. He deals a lot of damage. This is the first inkling of the pros' strategy, which is use a bunch of global ults to accumulate in one area and just slap down something really quick. And you'll see more evidence of this as time goes on, but this is the first inkling of that. So we've got two global ults. We've got Janus and Athena. The Athena is fairly strong as a pick, so that is good. She's in a good position right now. And then the casters are just trying to figure out what exactly they're going to pick. Now they pick Apollo. Now this is going to be kind of a combination of a comfort pick and a strategic pick, because he does have a global ult. They might be concerned about the Athena and the Janus' global ult, and they decided, whoever their ADC is, decided to pick up a global ult to kind of trade. The Geb was, I think, more counter-picked to Athena. Athena only has one actual hard crowd control, being her taunt. She's got a slow, but that's soft crowd control and generally not as concerning as her taunt. So Geb, with his ability to shield people out of the taunt, is a really strong counter pick to Athena in the early game. They picked Chernobog. This is really where the global ult plan locks in, and it's really obvious. The ban of Scylla, I feel, is again a more personal ban. You don't usually ban her. Yes, she is devastating. She can do a lot. I think there's also a bit of a concern by the pros that if they let Scylla go through, that one of the casters will be able to just chain ult and just absolutely dominate team fights using that. Again, that's still a bit more specific to the particular person that would be playing her. Now, the Circuit ban here on the caster's side is a mistake. There is a very obvious theme here of global ults. Thor would have been a better ban, and actually the pros will pick up Thor later on, bit of a spoiler there. But they're not picking global ults, and the pros have 3 global ults already. Now the Morrigan is an interesting ban because this isn't a target ban. This is to prevent the casters from using the Morrigan's ult to copy one of their global ults, because they don't want Apollo and the Morrigan showing up wherever they are instantaneously. They want to keep it down, if possible, to just the Apollo, because an Apollo by himself isn't going to do anything. So that is a very strategic ban to prevent the casters from being able to copy one of their global ults and get 2 people on scene, as opposed to just Apollo. Now, the Fenrir ban is banned for the same reason as Best. Actually, Circuit is banned because she's pretty high up in the meta at that point as well. But again, it was a mistake because there's a very obvious theme here for the pros that the casters have been goofing off too much to see, as you can see from the videos here, the sort of center video here. Horus is picked up here. Again, more for the global ult, also to kind of make the casters a bit nervous, because if Horus is going into the solo lane instead of, I'm sorry, not the solo lane, the support role instead of the Athena, Geb is a little less useful. Yes, Geb still maintains his use, but Horus has 2 hard crowd controls as opposed to Athena's 1, so Geb isn't quite as hard of a Horus counter as he is to Athena. Zhong Kui is a really, again, another good pick, but not exactly top meta, so this is more of a comfort pick here. I'll talk more about that later on. There's more evidence for that later in this video, but Zhong Kui is definitely a bit more of a comfort pick. Now, the pros don't know this at this point, but that is a solo lane pick. They're talking about, what's his name there? I can't remember his name off the top of my head. This was way back in the day. Well, I can't say way back in the day, but it was in the past. One of the commentators passed when he was a pro. Then they pick Morgana. Now, this is where the pros probably have figured out the casters' start, which is going to be Loki jungle, Apollo ADC, Geb support, Zhong Kui solo, and Morgana in mid. This is very likely what the casters are going to do. Again, the casters don't practice with really wild things a lot of the time. They might do wild things for fun on stream, but it's not something they consistently practice with, so they're going to be fairly standard in their roles. Whereas the casters have to be concerned with where is Athena. Is Athena support? Is Athena solo? Is Athena jungle? Right? Any of these could be options. Now they pick up Thor as their assassin. And again, there really should have been a recognition by the casters to go with to see the global ult theme going on here with the pros. Now the casters at this point talk a decent bit about the charity, which is fine, but we're not as concerned about the charity here. We're talking about the builds and the strategies, so we're going to go on ahead and skip to this point, where we will soon be getting into the first opening minute. Now, I'm only going to talk about the first minute, minute and a half here. Now, I want to actually point out really quick that all of the pros have teleport. Again, this is to emphasize their strategy of accumulating in one specific place and slapping down something very quickly before the casters with less coordination can react. Now, the casters, it's not so much that they're assuming that the casters are going to play poorly. They're not. That's not the assumption here. The casters are good players at minimum. The problem here is that the casters don't typically work together with large teams like 5-man teams. They'll typically play with a couple of friends, and I think the average party size for the casters is 3. I might be wrong about that, but I believe, generally speaking, the casters don't play with full teams of 5 in most cases. Aggro does. Mifflin probably. I believe Mifflin does. But I don't think the others play as often with full teams. All the pros scrim with full teams all the time. They have teamwork practiced down to a T. So they have a much better level of coordination than the casters are going to. Yes, some of the casters are former pros, particularly shout out to Aggro as being one of my heroes, but not all of the casters are former pros. Mifflin is also a former pro as well. Gormizer, I believe, is. I don't quite remember the name. But you can also see them gathering up here on the left side to, again, gather up, slap down an objective. Now, the casters... the commentators, I'm going to actually specify. The commentators actually mention this is kind of a troll slap, but it is, in this particular case, considering the disparity of teamwork between the two teams, or the expected level of teamwork between the two teams, this is actually legitimate strategy, but they're going to go ahead and let the dual lane go, and then they're going to come over here and just absolutely slap down mid and jungle. Now, there's a specific reason they chose mid and jungle rather than dual lane, because they could have gone after dual lane and eliminated them as well, but they chose the jungle for two very specific reasons. First, this is going to put the Loki Mifflin down early on, which gives their jungler, who is, in this case, you'll actually notice their jungler is, in fact, Horus. This gives Horus a very important advantage in terms of timing, because Horus, unfortunately, does not move as quickly as Loki does. Loki moves faster when he's invisible, so he's got that speed boost, and he has a higher base speed. Not by much, but a slightly higher base speed than Horus does. Thor is their support. Okay? Now, unfortunately, the one downside to this strategy is that the pros have now revealed who is going to go where. Horus here is their jungler, Thor is their support, right? That is something of a concern here. So you do have that little technical issue. It is also fairly interesting in that Chernobog is going to the solo lane here. Janus is the expected mid, but the actual technical ADC is Athena. You can actually confirm this using her starter item, and the Chernobog's starter item here. Now, this isn't quite as obvious to the casters, because this isn't too unusual of a starter item for ADCs, particularly. They probably anticipate at this point, having only seen that gank, that Athena is going to the solo lane, Chernobog is going to be going to the ADC role. Obviously, with Sentinel's Gift, Thor is going into the support role. Now, I've not seen Thor's support in a while, so this is kind of a blast from the past for me. Especially since I actually played at the semi-pro college level before. I played one tournament. We got knocked out pretty early, but our first match was against a support Thor that we were very much unprepared for. We did not practice enough on that team, but that brings me back, the support Thor. Now, there is, again, a second risk I actually want to point out really quick. We're approaching the end of where I want to go with this particular episode. But the dual lane here has already gotten to level 2. Now, the mid lane here, and the Chernobog as well, is already also hit level 2. Chernobog isn't going to really have a huge problem catching up, and you'll notice that the Chernobog teleported to get to lane a little bit faster, so he didn't lose anything. But the enemy dual lane could really press here, and the Gormizer here is leading the charge here, and they do pick it up. Okay, I have to remember sometimes which side I'm looking at it from. So this is the downside of the pros' gank strategy. Yes, they put Horus farther up. They gave Horus some more time, and they put Mifflin behind, Loki behind a decent bit here. But they also pushed forward their mid laner as well, the Janus. But in exchange, dual lane is going to suffer a little bit. So that's a fairly interesting question. But considering they have a more durable dual lane than normal, they have a tank Thor and a damage Athena. Excuse me. Which is an interesting combination there, and one that I think is going to help them outlast the enemy dual lane, who's got the squishier Apollo and the less damaging Geb. So it's going to be this really odd hybrid dual lane that I'm really going to be talking a lot about in the next episode. And you can also see here that Zhong Kui has a bit of an advantage in just straight up better crowd control at level 2 than what Chernobog has. Right, and at this particular point, they're just going to be recapping the gank. We'll actually go ahead and let this run, because this is actually fairly impressive as a 5-man gank. But that's where I'm going to be ending this particular episode. I'll be talking about the rest of the match later on. If you do like this, please let me know. I'm kind of experimenting with this format. There'll be another episode released tomorrow, but this is something I'm trying, so let me know what you think, and maybe some suggestions or specific questions that maybe I didn't cover, because there's a lot to talk about here, obviously, and maybe I didn't catch something to talk about. Maybe I noticed something, but I didn't talk about it and just forgot to mention it, or whatever. So if you have any questions, fire away. But thank you all very much for joining me. If you like this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.